I'm Idiotech, and today I want to talk to you about Escape From Tarkov. It's an interesting game. I've been playing it for the past week and really enjoying myself for the most part. However, it has a number of problems, and because it's in beta, I want to talk to you about those problems. But before we do, I just want to remind you that this channel is entirely supported via donations on Patreon. If you like my work and you want to see it continue, please consider heading over to patreon.com/idiotechgaming to show your support. So, what is Escape From Tarkov? Well, if you've played DayZ or H1Z1, these survival type games, it's similar to that. It doesn't have zombies, which is a mercy, but it's similar to that in the way that you collect gear and you try to survive. The way in which it's different is you enter on these small maps. They're called raids. Eventually, they plan to connect all of these different maps together into more of an open world setting, but as it stands right now, there are small maps with loot in them, and there are players and AI. You kill the players, you kill the AI, you take the loot, and you escape from the map. Pretty simple premise. Now, it's got some military simulator aspects to it. There's a crouching system that allows you to sort of change the exact position of the height of your character. There's a movement system that allows you to slow down to a crawl, or to speed up, or to run. There's a means of checking your ammo, checking your mag. You can shoot blind fire, you can do all sorts of different things. It's quite complex in terms of its mechanics. There's a full modding system to all of the weapons. They really are going for a deep system here when it comes to combat, and the combat is very satisfying when it works correctly. Once you escape from a raid, you can then take those items that you collected, and then you can trade them in with these traders in the game. Now, each trader has its own loyalty, and as you unlock more and more loyalty with those traders, you get access to better and better stuff, and you do that via a quest system. Also, what's interesting about the trading system is that everyone has access to the same traders, and they refresh once per hour. And so, if there's a huge demand for M4s, for example, the price of M4s will go up. There's also a specific trader called Fence that allows you to sell items to him that then players can buy directly from him. So it's a middleman for players to sell items to each other, which is kind of interesting also. On top of that, you also have a skill system which mostly levels up passively as you play the game, but it will give you bonuses to strength, endurance, metabolism, and this will help you deal with jumping better or throwing grenades better or running further, basic stuff like that. Also, you can level up weapons in a sense by getting better and better at them, and they will give you perks as well. It really is quite satisfying, and I've enjoyed my time with this game. That being said, the game does have a lot of problems, and I want to talk to you about those problems now. First up, the company itself. They are a child of a parent company, as it turns out, that does have some experience making video games. They've made a game called Contract Wars, which was a free-to-play multiplayer shooter primarily targeted at the Russian market, and then they went on to make a game called Hired Ops, which initially was supposed to be sort of an upgrade to Contract Wars and a standalone client, but ended up becoming its own thing. That game's in early access on Steam, it's not finished, and it has a lot of mixed reviews. But the studio itself has very little development history. They don't have any real information available on what their direction is for this game. If you want to learn about this game, you have to go read their Facebook posts from years ago. You have to go to their website and look at their blog posts from years ago. And you have to go and look up interviews which are translated from Russian because it's a Russian studio. So it's not very clear where they're headed. Now, they have talked about various systems such as the game being ultimately an open world game, which I guess would be similar to DayZ with loading screens between each map. That's nowhere to be seen right now. A lot of the features in this game are nowhere to be seen right now. Most of the maps aren't completed. There's a system called the Hideout where it's basically a player housing system and a whole bunch of like progression systems tied to that. That's nowhere to be seen. The game is kind of dragging its ass when it comes to development, and there hasn't been a huge amount of content updates over the past year. So when they say things like, hey, the game's coming out next year and the game's in beta right now, you're kind of like, well, hang on, this game's coming out soon. It's nowhere near finished. Like, most of the features in this game are not finished. The core gameplay loop is, and there's a lot of weapons and items and stuff like that, but the hideout's not finished, the open world's not finished, and most of the maps in the game aren't finished. There's also a ton of balance concerns, performance issues, things like that. So I'm a little dubious about the game coming out in the next year. And given the fact that this company doesn't have much of a track record at all when it comes to development, combined with the fact that they don't really seem to know where they're going long term with this product, I'm a little concerned about it from that perspective. However, there are some worse things that I'm going to talk about now. One of them is the various editions of the game. So You can buy the standard edition all the way up to what's called the Edge of Darkness edition. Now, in the standard edition of the game, you get some basic equipment, some rifles, some backpacks, a couple of, very primitive items. In the Edge of Darkness edition, you get a whole bunch of really great weapons, a bunch of really great items. You also get a bunch of trash that you can easily pick up in the game. Now, a lot of people initially complained about this and called it pay to win. And it is and it isn't. It's very easy to lose your gear in this game. Even if you're completely kitted out and you have the best armor and best weapons in the game, it's very easy for someone just to sneak up behind you in this game and just shoot you in the head and take your stuff. So if you're a new player, it's very likely you're going to lose those things, but it does give you an advantage, I will agree. And it's not ideal in any way. I would prefer this system wasn't here. However, what I have a real problem with are the following things. In this game, you have a container. It's called the Alpha container with the standard edition. You have 4 slots. Now, when you put things in those slots and die, you keep everything that's in the Alpha container, which is a cool mechanic because you can say, well, I'm doing this run and I picked up a bunch of really cool stuff and I totally don't want to lose this, this, and this, so I'll put it in my container. But everything else, if you die, you lose it. It's a decent system. I like it. The problem is if you buy the super expensive Edge of Darkness edition, you get a Gamma container. And a Gamma container has 9 slots, which is more slots than any other crate available in the game. You have a Beta container and an Epsilon container, both of which are not as big as the Gamma container. And when these containers matter is what's important here. Early on in the game, you'll find yourself low on resources and you'll want to try and maximize profit. Makes sense. You want to get more unlocks, you want to buy better weapons, and in order to do that, you need more money. And what people often end up doing in this game when they're out of cash is something called a hatchet run. So what you do is you take nothing but a knife or a hatchet into the raid factory, which is just a small map, okay? You enter that raid, you run around, and you loot boxes, military containers. You stick all that loot in your secure container, your Alpha container or your Gamma container, and then you most likely get killed or you escape. You do that for about an hour and you end up making anywhere between 100,000 and 500,000. Now, if you have that Gamma container, you can maximize your profits. You can also ensure that you don't lose a lot more important stuff, which means you progress faster because you can sell more stuff. And I found myself many times while playing this game really, really wanting that Gamma container, especially when you watch other YouTubers and streamers playing this game, which you will need to do, by the way, which is something I'll get into in a minute. You will feel the significant lack of that container in your life. And a lot of people feel compelled to buy the most expensive version of the game just to get that container. That's bullshit. Next up is the fort armor that you get when you buy the Edge of Darkness edition. Now, in this game, you have traders. You can go into a map, you kill some dudes, you take the stuff, you go back to the main menu, you go talk to traders, and you can sell them stuff. In order to access the next tier of items that they sell, you have to complete quests. In order to do this, you need to increase your loyalty level, right? You do that by doing quests. You do quests, it increases your loyalty level, and when your loyalty level is high enough and you meet the requirements, you unlock the next level of stuff. Well, there's a trader in the game called Skier, and his first quest is to give him fort armor. Problem is, fort armor is the rarest armor in the game, and it's very hard to get. But if you buy the Edge of Darkness edition, you can immediately complete that quest. It's a little convenient to me that the hardest item to obtain in the game, pretty much, is a requirement for the first quest with a guy that sells some really useful stuff. And if you buy the Edge of Darkness edition, which is like $150, then you can just do that quest immediately as soon as you enter the game. It's clearly an incentive for people to buy this Edge of Darkness edition, and I don't like it at all. Next, we have the loyalty boost. So, as I was just explaining, in order to unlock the access to new tiers of items from traders, you need to increase your loyalty with them. If you buy the Edge of Darkness edition, you get a loyalty boost, so you don't have to spend so much time grinding. And finally, we have inventory space. The inventory space in this game is a huge thing. It's very important. The whole game is about collecting and acquiring loot. If you buy the standard edition, you get a smaller inventory space than if you buy the supreme, awesome, extra amazing edition for $150. They did say recently that they plan to add a system into the game that will allow you to increase inventory space over time, and that players will gain access to higher levels of inventory space. So provided they do that, I guess that works. But still, you're left in a situation where if you spend more money, you get a head start. You don't necessarily get to win, but you get a significant head start on other players. And the further into this game you get, the more skill points you get, the more gear you get, the more money you get, the more powerful you get. That's how this game works. So it's kind of pay to win, but it's more pay to skip, which then eventually leads to you winning more frequently. I don't like it. Let's put it that way. Next up, no refunds. So, in the terms of service, it states that by pre-ordering the game, you're making a non-refundable deposit. So you're not entitled to a refund, even though in many countries, they're legally obligated to provide you with one. And this brings me on to the topic of Steam and early access. This game, fundamentally, is in early access. They're calling it a beta, but it isn't. It isn't finished. It isn't remotely feature complete. This is an early access game that isn't on Steam. Now, it doesn't make sense to me that the game isn't on Steam because it's a survival game. They do really, really well on Steam. Steam has a huge number of people viewing it all the time, and they would be very interested in this game. It would give them a ton of exposure and, as a result, a ton of money to complete the development of their game. So why are they not on Steam? Doesn't make much sense to me. They don't have any immediate plans to go to Steam either. Well, one of the reasons is they don't have to give you refunds if they're not on Steam. I know that's kind of cynical, but it's also true, and it's something you should consider. So that's the business and company end. Let's talk about some of the game-related problems. Now, most of this stuff can probably be fixed, and I hope it is, because as I said, I really do enjoy playing this game, and I have hopes for it. I want it to do well, because it's great. It's a lot of fun, very enjoyable game. But the things I've just mentioned, along with the things I'm about to mention, just make me pause for a second. They make me consider, is this actually going to work out, or are we going to have another DayZ on our hands? First up, performance. As you would expect, the game runs like shit, just like every other early access game. Even on low settings, performance on the map's customs and shorelines drop below 60 on a regular basis, even for people with very high-end systems. I myself am running a GTX 980, and I get around 45 FPS on low settings. Now, this game is made in the Unity engine, and as a result, it comes with some of the problems you will see in the Unity engine when people are creating these large maps. One of them is tile loading issues. So as you start to load up new areas in a map, the game will freeze for a few seconds, which in a game about not dying is a problem because you can get headshotted in that time, and I have, and it sucks. Also, the game has a tendency, for me at least, to drop down to 20 FPS and lock itself there for a few minutes and then climb back up to 60. No idea why that's happening. These performance issues have been in the game for a while. People have been complaining for a while. If you're looking for 144 FPS, you're not getting it. If you're looking to play this game maxed out on a reasonable system, you're not getting it. You're going to have to run it on low, and you're going to have to deal with sub 60. That's the current state of the game. Next up, I want to talk about desync and server issues. I've been killed by invisible enemies. I've been killed by invisible grenades that were silent. I've been killed by silent enemies. I've been killed around walls. I've not been able to kill enemies when standing in front of them and shooting them in the head. And I've been taking damage out of nowhere. Now, this doesn't happen every game. I'd say every 3 or 4 games I run into these issues. But that gets fucking frustrating, and it gets frustrating real quick. These games are anywhere between 30 and 45 minutes long on average. And if you're very careful and you're taking your time and you've killed a few guys and you've got some great loot and you're excited to get that out of the raid, and then you get killed by an invisible grenade or a silent enemy, or you just start taking damage from nowhere and then die, that's pretty fucking frustrating. So those issues need to be fixed. Next up, let's talk about balance. So there is none, really. I mean, this is kind of by design. The game is designed to be unfair. People who put more time in are more powerful. Now, you can counter that by being smart, but initially you start off weak and you grow to be strong, and that's one of the appeals of the game. That's one of the reasons you play it. You want to take the power away from other people and keep it for yourself and have the best guns. That's why it's fun and appealing, but it comes with its own problems. In an attempt to mitigate risk, players will often enter raids with either no equipment at all or the best equipment they have gotten in the game so far, which is usually, for some of these players, like top tier stuff. The problem with that is you've got 2 groups of people trying to mitigate risk. If you have the best gear in the game, you're less likely to die. And if you have no gear, aside from a knife, then if you die, who cares? Unfortunately, this leads to a somewhat unenjoyable gameplay experience most of the time because you'll be charged by guys with hatchets, which you'll easily kill if you see them in time. And then when you finally do get into a firefight, you're fighting guys with silenced M4s, and you're sitting there with an AK and a bit of armor and a backpack, and they've got silenced M4s and the best armor in the game, and you fucking die. That can be pretty frustrating. They need to find a way within this dog-eat-dog system, which I do like, to encourage people to take risks. Next up is quest difficulty. So there are quests in the game. As I said, it's very much like an RPG in many ways. You do quests for traders, you unlock access to higher tiers of items, you can earn skills passively over time, like strength, where you improve your throwing ability or your jumping ability, you get better with using certain weapons. It has this progression system, and part of that progression system is quests. And you do these quests or tasks for the traders. The quests themselves, though, are bullshit. Most of them are bullshit. They're either boring, like go kill 14 guys, okay, fine, or they're damn near impossible because of RNG. So I'll give you an example. The therapist, which is the person that sells you medications in the game, has a quest. It's the second quest where she wants you to find a stash of water. So you're like, okay, how do I do this? Well, the game doesn't give you any fucking information whatsoever on how to do this. So of course you go to the wiki, you go to a guide, you look it up on YouTube. You need to find a key. It's called the Room 206 key. It randomly spawns in the backpacks of enemy AI on the map customs. Once you have that key, you have to go to room 206, which is in the dormitories, which, again, if you don't know the maps, you wouldn't know where that is. And then you open the door and then you complete the quest. Once you've done that, you then have to escape and live. Otherwise, you'll fail the quest. So I tried to do this quest for 3 hours, and I farmed keys, and it never dropped. That's not fun. It's not a fun system. Some people are going to get the quest instantly, and some people are not. That's not how the quest should work. So there's a lot of problems with the quest in this game. I'm sure they can iron this out. I'm sure they can fix it. They have said they're going to improve the quests moving forward, and I hope they do, because right now they're very frustrating. And unfortunately, because of the way that gear is distributed in this system, you have to do these quests in order to get access to the next tier of items from a trader. If you can't do it because of RNG, you're going to get pretty frustrated and maybe want to drop the game. We got 2 more things to talk about, and then I'll give you my conclusion. So we got spawns, all right? So this is the spawn of items, the spawn of players, the spawn of enemy AI called scavs. When I first started playing the game, you spawned at one end of the map, and you had to make your way to the other end of the map. Now, the problem with that was that people would just run as fast as they could to the other end of the map, stand there, and shoot you in the head once you got there, and they'd spawn camp you. So what they did was they allowed players to spawn from both sides of the map, and then they had to make their way across the map to these various locations for extraction. There's more than one now. That's very much an improvement, and I appreciate their efforts to try and fix this issue. However, you can still practically just spawn, stand there with the best gear, and wait for someone to walk down the road and shoot them in the head, and probably profit. So I think the best way to solve this is just to add more extraction points and more infill points, and I'm hoping they do that, because right now it's still a problem, and I've been spawn camped a number of times. Another thing I want to talk about is scav spawning. Now, scavs are enemy AI players. You can play as them once every 30 minutes, and it gives you an opportunity to get some free loot, and that's a cool system. But the problem with them is that they spawn in static locations that are predictable, and once you learn the maps, you can very easily exploit them. They are not the best AI in the world. They have a tendency to headshot you instantly or shoot you and break your legs. They're very predictable in a sense, and they've tried to improve that over time, but one of the things they really need to do is make them spawn in completely random locations, because once you learn the maps, the fear starts to go away. You start to not be afraid of certain areas of the map because you know players likely don't go there, and you know there's no scavs. The best way to solve that is to add some randomness to that system so that you never know what's around the next corner. You're always surprised. Finally, I want to talk to you about the new player experience, and this is a huge concern for me. Currently, there are no tutorials. There is no information regarding how to mod weapons, how to trade, how any of the mechanics work, how the guns work, how the firing modes work, how to crouch, how to do fucking anything. Nothing in this game is tutorialist. Now, I get that it's not finished and that it's in beta and that maybe this will come later, but the game is incredibly complex and it offers a ton of depth. And at the moment, you're having to rely on community guides from Reddit and YouTube videos and streamers to explain this game to people. You need a robust set of tutorials to introduce people to the mechanics of this game, and they don't have it. And there doesn't appear to be any sign that they're planning to do that moving forward either. At the moment, they're promoting heavily YouTubers who are explaining the game to people. And I guess they're hoping that the game will take off in that sense, and that people will learn from YouTubers and streamers, and maybe someone will start a wiki up one day that explains some of the mechanics. But in my opinion, that's a lazy way of approaching the new player experience. I don't think it's going to lead to retention in the way that a proper tutorial system would. And that's a problem, and they need to address it moving forward. In conclusion, while I've enjoyed my time with this game, and I really, really have, and that's primarily due to the risk reward and the mechanics and the gunplay they have on offer here. But at the current pace of development, combined with the issues that I've raised in this video, it does leave me with some doubt as to the future of this game. You know, if it doesn't get the adoption it needs, it's a multiplayer PvP game, it could very easily end up in a DayZ situation. I know I've focused primarily on the negatives, but I think it's important to address them because the game's not finished yet, and it's in beta, and so feedback is useful, but also because I want to make sure that if you go and buy this game, you know what you're getting. If you're going to pick this up, or if you're interested in picking this up, I would very strongly advise you to wait for a Steam release so that you do have the option to refund if things go south or you don't like the direction the game is going. That's what I'd suggest you do. It's a fun game, has a lot of potential, but it also has a lot of problems. I'll let you guys decide for yourselves whether it's something you're interested in. As always, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you found it informative, and I will see you guys next time.